After the Panthers had hired and in less than a year fired Frank Reich as their head coach, they went out this past off season. They hired Dave Canales, and you're like, okay, he was the offensive coordinator in Tampa, worked with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield had a bit of a career resurgence at 2023. Exciting possibilities as he gets to work with young Bryce Young. What's he going to do here? And how is he going to maximize Bryce Young and his capabilities, minimize his deficiencies? Well, I'll tell you how you don't fucking do that. The way you don't do that is by barely playing him in the preseason when he really needed the reps, especially when he's learning a new system. And then you throw him to the Wolves in this new system that he's barely played under. And then after a couple of games, you bench him for Andy fucking Dalton. Like, what the hell are you doing here? The number one goal of the program in 2024 for the Panthers, the number one goal was not winning a bunch of ball games. It was the development of Bryce Young. And it frustrates the hell out of me when I see so many organizations, in particular head coaches, that don't get this and they don't understand it. And they go rogue in a different direction from where the organization needs them to. They're signing up to be a head coach at a situation they're not understanding to play the games they're playing. You were not being hired by the Carolina Panthers because they thought they were going to be an instant Super Bowl contender. That's ridiculous. You were being hired because of your work with Baker Mayfield and your offensive chops to be able to help develop and cultivate Bryce Young. And early on, it was looking like an absolute unmitigated disaster. And as a result, the team was 1-7. Whoopee! They won a game with Andy Dalton, and guess what? Soon after that, he started sucking too. Like, just dumb. So after that 1-7 start, I'm starting to think like, hey, Dave Canales really sucks too, and this is a disaster of the season, and he might need to be a one-and-done guy. And with Tepper as the owner, you never fucking know, right? You never fucking know. But then something happened. Put Bryce Young back in. They go and beat the Saints and the Giants. They stuck a game to the two-time defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs, and then the next 2 weeks, they stuck a game to the Buccaneers. They stuck a game to the Eagles. Like the second half of the season, even though the Panthers weren't great by any stretch of the imagination, the offense was playing better. The defense still sucked cock mostly. But they found a way to be competitive against some really damn good teams. Like, that's a reflection of them being well coached. That's a reflection of the players buying in. And then they won 2 of their last 3 games against the Cardinals and the Falcons. Like, if you're a Panthers fan and you're looking for some reason for hope or optimism, at the midway point of the season, there was none. It looked like Canales was an idiot and Bryce Young was a complete and total bust. But then as the second half of the season went along, this team starts to play better and a lot better against some quality teams, and they beat some of them at the end of the year. Bryce Young, while he didn't look great, he looked better. Like, yeah, you've got some reason for hope here, right? Chuba Hubbard put in some work, over 1,350 total yards, 11 total touchdowns. Like, he's their primary skill player, if you will. He's the guy that can make the offense go. And what's interesting, as much as the attention and focus and interest is on Bryce Young and the offensive side of the ball, and understandably and legitimately so, it was the defense that, frankly, was the bigger pile of shit this year. Now, you would hear for a couple of years about Ejiro Evero and how great of a defensive coordinator he was. Well, if he's so great, why does the defense suck so much cock? Frankly. They were 32nd in total yards allowed, 32nd in points allowed, 32nd against the run, 29th in sacks. So they couldn't stop the run, they couldn't cover anybody, and they couldn't get any pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Gee, I wonder how that was going to go. And for a team a few years ago that invested in an entire draft, I realize different era, that was under the Matt Fool era, that literally spent every single draft pick on the defensive side of the ball like dumb dicks. To sit there now in 2024 and have easily the worst defense in the NFL this past season. Like, what the fuck is going on here? The fact that they played so well the second half of the season, in spite of this dog shit defense, is actually some decent work. And I will say this, in defense or in fairness to Panthers fans, as much as Bears fans, myself included, even kept talking about the Hall and keep pounding, Panthers, keep pounding. All that shit talking and all that everything else. And yet here we sit after the 2024 season The Chicago Bears and the Carolina Panthers finished with the exact same record. And you tell me, based off a second half of the season performance, who you would feel better about heading into 2025. It certainly wouldn't fucking be the Bears. Right? Like, granted, would you rather have Bryce Young or would you rather have, like, Caleb Williams? You know what I mean? Like, would you rather have um, all the other players that came along with that, the DJ Moores, Tyreek Stevenson, et cetera, et cetera? Like, you would take the Bears under the deal. But it actually points to like organizational stupidity that the Bears are being celebrated for this great haul that King Poles pulled off, and yet it's all the same. With the so-called worst quarterback, the Panthers had the same number of wins. Just saying. So Panthers fans, I got your back on that one. Like, people could start talking shit about the haul because in relation, like, the Bears look really stupid here. How do you take that big, massive haul that you got from trading down to pick 1 to pick 9, you know, and you turn it into a 5-win team? That's dog shit. And that is like the Bears get Caleb Williams out of it. They get Darnell Wright out of it. They get DJ Moore out of it. And you're telling me that they can't do any better than 5-12? Yeah, haul my ass. Who gives a shit? Just saying. The Panthers go into this offseason. It's interesting, right? Because to me, sometimes, if you look at a team and they're really bad, that's one thing. If you look at a team and they're really bad, they should, in theory, have a ton of cap space. And you're like, okay, like they've kind of bottomed out. They're not good, and that's why they have a ton of cap space. Is they don't have players that are worth paying a ton of money. The worst is when you're a bad team and then you look at their team and you say, who the hell is really worth paying big time money? And they have no fucking cap space. You're like, what the hell's wrong here? What the hell's going on here? Especially for a team like the Panthers that have a quarterback in Bryce Young who's on a rookie scale contract. But yet the Panthers sit here with $25 million in cap space. That's pretty parse for their situation, right? Now, at least they have their first round pick this year. That certainly helps. It's 8th overall. They should be able, in theory, to identify somebody and come in and provide immediate and long-term value, be a difference maker for them, and they certainly need it. But it's kind of a weird dynamic where, you know, now it's like, how do you make the Panthers better? And I think in terms of the offseason, it starts with wide receiver. It really does. Like, sure, you drafted Xavier Legette last year, but, you know, that's one guy, and he's not that level of dude. Like, it's fun to hear talk about eating roadkill and stuff, but not that level of dude right now, right? More of a secondary type of receiver. You need a dude. That could be like Bryce Young's security blanket. That could be Bryce Young's go-to guy. They do not have that on this roster. But as much as I could talk about the offense, like, there is a piece where I'm talking about when in doubt, you default to the offense when you're building around your quarterback. You have to. Because it is more important for your offense to be great than it is your defense to be great. You want your defense to be good, certainly, right? But they don't have to be great if your offense is great. The problem is the Carolina Panthers defense is so bad, so terrible, so brutal dog shit that you have to go into this offseason, into this draft, and invest heavily on that side of the ball. Because now you're getting to a point where the defense is so bad that it can actually hinder Bryce Young's development because it puts too much pressure on him, and he just doesn't have the weapons and skill, talent, and protection around him to be the type of guy right now that could go out there and put up massive numbers and carry a team on his back kind of thing, right? It's just not there. So they're going to have to address edge rusher, defensive end, defensive tackle, corner. Like, the Panthers got to get serious about fixing this defense because, again, it is so bad that it actually gets to a place where it hinders Bryce Young's development. And you can get away with an average to good defense. You cannot get away with a dog shit defense. At some point in time in games that matter, those chickens are going to come home to roost, I promise you. So, overall, for the Panthers, was it a bad season? Certainly. Did it start off terribly? Yes. Do I think Dave Canales initially really fumbled the bag when it came to how he managed Bryce Young? Absolutely. You're going to see some folks in the comments, I'm sure, talking about, well, the benching helped him for a few weeks. It didn't fucking help shit. That's stupid. That's just stupid. you're pointing to something that's not provable. Meanwhile, I could say, hey, it was a really bad idea to barely give him any preseason reps, and then the first chance you got, you yanked him out. One way to undercut his freaking confidence. That's easier and more verifiably true. But it got better, right? So if you're a Panthers fan, you're like, hey, we can stop hearing all this shit about the Hall because so what? You saw some progress. You saw some potential for hope in the second half of the season. Big off season for this Panthers team. Now you got to like figure out, especially in a weak ass division like the NFC South, it's not unreasonable to say like if the Panthers get Bryce Young a top weapon in the passing game and they fix his defense some, like the Panthers could absolutely be in the mix for the NFC South title in 2025.